Good day, everyone. There, the mic is working. I just want to welcome you all to this afternoon session of Nation in Conversation. So today, my name is Frans van Redlinghuis. I work at Senves, and we are very honored to have this prestigious panel of guests for our session on biofuels. So we're going to delve a little bit deeper and explore the possibility of biofuels. Obviously, it's a topic for discussion, a very hot topic at this stage, especially if you go and look at current fuel prices, etc. So we are going to delve a little bit deeper on the applications that it might have for producers, but then also we are concerned or wondering whether the private sector can also play a role in that. So I just want to welcome you all to our session at Nation and Conversation, and I hope to see you also for the rest of the week's panel discussions that's continuing tomorrow. We're going to look at a short scene setter video where after I'm going to hand over to Theo to start the conversation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's a very topical question, biofuels, and where does it fit into the future? I think we've all experienced the pain of filling up a tank. We're all watching this. All of a sudden, everybody is knowledgeable and is spending time on something called the Strait of Hormuz. If I talked about it 3 months ago, nobody would have known what we were talking about. But now everybody talks about Hormuz, and everybody talks about fuel and the fuel price and where we are. So this panel, I think, is for us very apt to talk now about biofuels and where does it fit in. But I'm going to start with the Minister, John. I must say, for me, there's always a few things every year in Nampo that stands out. This year, that's standing out is the difference between people trying to make things work and people making noise. And it's important when we talk to organized agriculture, and I want to congratulate organized agriculture for the way that they stuck into getting things done. And personally, yourself as well. It is an uncomfortable environment with challenges. We've got the challenge of foot and mouth. We have the challenge of maize prices, grain prices, input costs. If you look back, and I saw your discussion on foot and mouth this morning, last night, the discussion at the social event. If you look back at the last 2 days, just a few observations.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a number of observations. I mean, the first is to just see how, despite the fact that so many agricultural commodity groups are under pressure, whether it's the red meat sector, whether it's maize, whether it's wheat, there's still positivity and resilience and a drive to continue. And I think that makes a huge difference, looking for solutions rather than wallowing in where the problems are. And that has really stood out for me. The innovation, of course, always amazes me, that we still see so much innovation, and agriculture is really driving innovation in so many perspectives and so many ways. And then finally, just the attitude of our farmers, just never give up. No matter how tough the going is getting, they're out there, they're in the fields, they're under difficult circumstances, and we're facing perfect storms in so many areas, low prices, the Strait of Hormuz, high input costs, credit changes with proposals with banks. And I just think it's amazing to see that resilience. And I think that's really what sets our farmers apart from farmers in other parts of the world. It's always amazing to me to go and, when I travel around the world, to interact with other countries and to see the huge regard for our farmers in South Africa held by others. These are people competing under difficult circumstances with no subsidies and are still shooting the lights out. Great news came in yesterday. We've now surpassed Spain as the single biggest exporter of citrus in the world. And we're completely unsubsidized, and it's due to our farmers and the teams around them that help them. Yeah.
John, the topic today is biofuels, and to what extent it can be part of our future.
Yeah.
First of all, what is the current government policy and view on biofuels?
Well, biofuels have been stuttered quite substantially since 2007, where you have spurts where there's suddenly movement on it, and policies are developed, and then you see an ebbing away again of it. The last paper I was able to pull was produced in 2014, and we're busy going through that to not go back to square one and try and reinvent the wheel. Because I think we do have an opportunity now, and the time is opportune, given the huge oil price increase and the price of diesel going up, for us to start really seriously catching up to some of our counterparts. And I'm not talking about our counterparts in first world countries, I'm talking about our counterparts in BRICS alone. Brazil
South America.
Brazil and India are world leaders now in biofuels and what it means. And I just pulled some of the stats here that were part of the briefing document that was given to me when we went to see the president at the investment conference around this. And it says here very clearly that our existing maize surplus of between 2 to 4 million tons could produce between 800 million and 1.6 billion litres of ethanol annually. And there are some things we have to change. We've now got the paperwork. We've done the strategy. It's been flogged to death. It's now time to make the tough choices and the tough interventions that need to be done to get it over the line.
But government is not known for implementing plans. But I'm gonna get.
Well, we'll get to that just now, hopefully. Yeah.
Peter Starling, you are the chairperson of Elco NCP. So first of all, who and what is Elco NCP?
Oh, thank you. Elco NCP is the current iteration of an operation that's been running on the banks of the Mgeni since about 1868. And we make alcohol at that operation for all of you to drink, so thank you very much for supporting us.
I've been drinking a lot during FMD.
Yeah, it was a good year. Yeah.
But maize prices were high.
But maize prices were high. I didn't say it was a profitable year, I said it was a good year. Elco NCP was bought by the Elco Group in 2001. 2001, and previously it was part of Centrichem, which was one of the chemical conglomerates, and then part of Dow Chemical. Elco Group is a Belgian-based company, and you talk about the stuttering of biofuels. In 2007, the only production unit that Elco Group owned around the world was Elco NCP, and in 2007 we made 50 million litres of ethanol for the beverage industry. Elco
Your
Group,
source, what was your source?
our source at the time was molasses from the sugarcane industry.
From the sugarcane
From the
industry.
sugar industry, yeah. Now, 2025, 26, depending on how many times you ask ChatGPT the answer, Elco Group is somewhere between the 8th and the 15th largest producer of ethanol on the planet. We produce 1.5 billion litres of ethanol, of which 1.4 billion is for fuel.
1.4 billion of?
Of ethanol for fuel blending. We have two plants in Europe, one in Ghent and one in Rotterdam, and we have a plant in Canada.
In South Africa, let's just quickly come back to South Africa. What's your current stock that you use?
Current feedstock is maize.
You moved from sugar to maize.
We moved from sugar to maize, and I'm sure most of the audience here is not sugarcane farmers, so we went to the extent actually of buying a share in the sugar mill to try and, so from 2008 to 2021 we owned a share in the Umfolozi sugar mill, but the sugar industry in South Africa has been a continual state of decline since 2000. Sugar
and the maize industry is a high quality.
Yeah, so
efficient.
basically, and we now make 100,000 cubes. So we've invested a lot of money since 2000, to expand, because our markets expanded and our customers expanded, and we couldn't do that with the sugar industry. There was no more raw material. And maize, you got lots of it.
Dr. Ferdi Meyer, Managing Director of BFAP. Ferdi, you've done quite a bit of research on this, and John was talking about price movements, and my view is always, one can talk about these things when prices are high, but that's not necessarily what a long-term investor should be looking at. What's your research tell you?
Yeah, no, exactly too. It's exactly what John was mentioning. So this is literally our round number 3 of this whole cycle. So if you just think about it, you have high fuel prices or high oil over 100. The moment it goes over 100, maize prices go down, inverse, that's where the margins open up, and suddenly we have this debate again. And then you have the solid companies who've been doing this over some time. We have a opportunity in the non-fuel market currently to do it. So I think principally, if we think globally, the time where the world kicked off in 2000, let's say 5, 6, why did it happen? If you think about the Americans, there was a big lobbying, there was a big push. And there was a lot of, in those times, the government was looking at it saying, you know, these agriculture prices, we are overproducing. Prices were extremely low. Derek, probably your maize prices was around about 80, 90, below $100. And they created market in a certain way, and it fed well into this fuel debate of producing some level of local production. Now, just quickly, I want to add that, remember, agriculture, even in the US, in Brazil, you are producing a bigger share of the local fuel market. In the US and in South Africa also, you can very quickly, you can maybe do it at 5%, 10%, but then it already has a huge implication for your agriculture sector.
In
and
terms of demand,
opportunities.
in terms of additional demand.
Exactly, that you can create. So you can vary your leverage of fuel to agriculture is a significant, fuel market is a huge market. I think we need to understand that. But it's not a fear, it's kind of more an opportunity that you can create in that space. So when I, just after COVID, I was in the US, and we talked to the Soybean Association, and the guys were mentioning higher biodiesel blending mandates coming in, or new support mechanisms coming in, creating incentives on the fuel side in order to pull your grains or your agriculture sector. And that's a principle of this whole model, is you want to create, if they were already anticipating after COVID, after Ukraine war, prices are going to come down, your farmers are going to come under pressure. What are we going to do to support them? And it was kind of this whole debate with fuel and then supporting agriculture. So those are the kind of these cycles. So long story short, the principles remain the same. If we don't create this pull on the fuel side, in other words, if we don't have the form of a blending mandate.
And that's the blending mix that people talk about.
Exactly. And it can be coming in different ways. If we can learn internationally. The people are getting very or kind of different incentives, and Peter, I think you can talk about it, in form of carbon taxes, or in a very creative way.
But you need that demand to make it bankable.
You need that bankable. You need that pull. Agriculture from agriculture side, it's not a push story. It's a pull story. If you don't create that pull, you won't survive the moment. So next year, let's say we have a drier year, maize prices start running up again. If we sort out oil comes down to 70 or 60, your economics at the plant change completely.
Derek Matthews, a well-known producer and a well-known person in organized agriculture, and a person that's always happy to join these panels. You have experience, Derek.
Yes, my dad, my brother, myself, and 2 other partners. In 2005, maize prices were around 400 Rand a ton. 400 Rand a ton, believe it or not. And very, very much almost carbon copy of what we're experiencing now. And just simply couldn't sell the maize. And, ethanol was presented as a solution. The US had just made huge investments, and that it was actually still in the beginning stages in the US as well back then. And my brother and I took a trip to the US. We attended what was called EPAC, Ethanol Producers and Consumers. It was a conference, and we figured that if there are producers and consumers together, you're going to get a fairly good idea of what it was. This was around July of 2005. And we came back deciding it's possible, it's doable, we can do it on the farm, and we can make the investment. We saw a solution to value add our maize that was sitting in the silos. We harvested it, we put it in the silos, and we didn't go anywhere with it. Okay, and we commenced building the plant. We built the plant on the farm. By the 11th of November of 2005, we were producing the first ethanol.
How long did that take?
Well, from July to November.
Okay, so it's a few months.
So a few months, and that's just from internet studies and stuff like that. There was no, well, I had no budget to be able to afford engineers, etc., etc. So I built a very rudimentary plant. It was sufficient for the market that we targeted. We targeted household fuel at the time. So if you jellify the ethanol you make it a much safer product to use. Of course, you have the emissions benefit and all that sort of thing. The biggest challenge was the calorific value of ethanol is considerably lower than fossil fuels. So you are going to have higher consumption to reach the same energy output. That's just a fact, and you can't change it. So the challenge we had was in the design of the little stove. We had to increase the efficiency to a point where it was actually cheaper to cook a meal on the ethanol stove than it was with kerosene, with paraffin. And I didn't listen to my good friend Ferdio. He said to me, Derek, I don't know if this can work. I didn't. John was saying earlier, our farmers, they're just resilient. They keep going. They never say, well, that's exactly it. They never say die. So you tell me I can't do it, I'm going to do it. Really. So I did that, and we were pretty successful at it. But then comes the next challenge is the market. I did not have any budget to change consumer patterns. Now anybody that understands consumers will understand if you've got a consumer that's used to paying X rand a litre for paraffin and you want to put an alternative in place and it's more than paraffin, it's a no-go.
Yeah.
Irrespective of whether you are presenting a cheaper cooking solution or not, safer or not. It'd take a huge budget to change that consumer pattern, which I unfortunately didn't have. Then an opportunity came up during the 2010 World Cup, or just prior to the 2010 World Cup. I had a phone call about 8 o'clock one evening. Chap from Metro Bus in Johannesburg said, "Can you make me ethanol?" I said, "Well, it depends on what you want. I can make ethanol, but if you wanted 96 to 100% ethanol, no, I can't make it because my plant wasn't set up for that." So he said, "I'll send you a spec sheet." And he sent me the spec sheet, and ED95 is a product that's ethanol. It's then 95, so it's 5% additive and 95% ethanol, right? So and its minimum standard was 92. I was consistently producing at 94%, which is a normal single distillation operation. And so during the 2010 World Cup, we had a Scania bus running on our fuel, as a demonstration. So we proved concept, we could do it and everything. The chap retired from Metro Bus before the project was completed, never bought the buses. They were going to buy 70 of these buses. I even built a fuel station in Johannesburg, in Randburg. Put a station, the tanks, everything's in there. They mine supposedly. In my mind, they mine. They are there. I don't know where they are. So then, because Dave, he retired, nobody took up the thing. They never ever bought the buses and so on. Then comes around 2014, 15. I get another phone call. Or Scania brought somebody out, employed in South Africa, and was driving this bus thing, and they got in 2 waste removal trucks, dump trucks, that were going to run in the city. And, okay, can you do the fuel? I did the fuel for them, no problem. I can do anything. And then they said, all right. They were going to buy the trucks. They were going to buy the buses, at least, Bojanala Bus Company. They were going to buy the buses. I needed to sign a guarantee, a supply guarantee. Now, okay, I've got a plant that can do 4 million tons, or had a plant that can do 4 million litres a year. If that plant breaks down, I could supply sufficient for what they wanted. But if it broke down, I had a problem. Then I had to import it out of Brazil or wherever it's the cheapest in the world. So I had to do my pricing on a supply guarantee. I had to do the pricing at whatever it was going to cost me to be able to honor that guarantee. And that put me out of the market. So they didn't buy their buses either. Come 2012, I closed the doors because you can't sell the stuff.
So it all, on your, from your story, it all depends on the bankable demand.
You've got to have the demand. You've got to have the pull. We
pull
can
is
build a
not there,
factory tomorrow.
And we can
It's
produce
easy,
it, and we can
easy.
produce rice. Why is, Peter, in some other countries in the world, what do they do to create the demand?
Well, if I look at our operations in Europe and North America, and we do a lot of business out of Brazil, but we haven't ever invested in Brazil. You have different reasons for biofuel programs. So United States and Brazil were fundamentally energy self-sufficiency, so don't import fuel, but we have big agricultural industries that have ability to grow. So we
To
will
supply the feedlot.
to supply the feedlot. So we will mandate that the oil companies have to buy it. And if we create the offtake, the agricultural industry will be able to develop to supply it. Okay, so in Brazil, they gave cheap loans to, way back in the mid-70s, cheap loans to sugar industries to build ethanol plants. Those loans are long gone. You don't get cheap loans anymore. In the United States, they just said, you got to put it in, and pretty much incentivize the pricing to extent with the oil company by penalizing them for not using it.
Okay. And that means you create the bankable demand.
So you create the best. So now in South Africa, we've worked a long time with the oil industry, but they're doing us a favor by considering putting ethanol into petrol, and maybe when they had the refineries and things was a bit different, but it's, they're saying we won't pay more than the basic fuel price, and so they're doing us a favor, and all of that work that's being done is being done focusing on agriculture. If you don't make the oil industries buy and incentivize them, I mean, in Europe, there's value in, they didn't do it for biosecurity, they did it for sustainability, so it's a different model. So all of the incentives are steered towards low carbon, etc.
So the first question you have to address, and that's from a government's point of view, why would you want a viable biofuel industry or not? Why would you want that?
Well, first of all, if one looks at what we spend as a proportion of our budget on importing oil and fuel into the country every single year, it's excessive, and there are cheaper options. But if you want to open up that pathway, government's also then got to come to the party. In Brazil, they do it by subsidizing the cost of the ethanol-based fuel. Makes it cheaper for consumers to use the ethanol-based fuel rather than using traditional fuel supplies. But they also mandate blending mixes. So those are mandated by government. I think what is also different now in terms of the demand is the new regulations around aviation fuel and around shipping fuel, where there's now mandatory amounts that have been set that we have to move to by 2030 in order
And that will
to
create more of a regenerative view on it.
Absolutely, and we'll have to meet that demand that's now being created as well. But to my mind, and my interest in it from an agri perspective is that it gives farmers options.
It's another buyer.
At the moment, farmers are victims of the international price, whether it's maize, whether it's sugar, whether it's any one of the other products, and they become trapped in having to accept that price. This, I think, would open up options for farmers to be able to then have choices about what they do with what they're producing.
Ferdi, I want to talk to you about the price volatility. The volatility of prices in terms of oil price, and the volatility we now in maize almost at export parity. But we're not always at export parity. And export parity is quite a bit of determinants in terms of the size of our harvest, of the price, all of those things. If you take a view of the prices, there's only certain times when it will make pure financial sense. Just your view on that.
Yeah, so I think if we just think about maize and the productivity of our maize, let's just quickly talk about those numbers on how fast our maize industry has expanded. So Derek, from let's say 2005 until now, 20 years down the line, we have improved our yields on an annual average by between 4 and 5%. Now, I'll tell you, that is faster than what the Americans have done. We've actually closed the gap on the US.
I was in a discussion on Monday
Yeah.
when somebody that's my age, so an older gentleman, he was saying that when he finished varsity, he thought they would give him an honorary doctorate if he can achieve 2 tons a hectare on his farm. He said today is averaging 7 tons a hectare. And he's got no doctorate, but he's averaging 7 tons.
Yeah, so our farmers' ability to adopt technology, to bring it in, and that's why, you know, all these, those regulations and, you know, Grain SA and companies doing a lot of work around that. We need the best technology, and our farmers are hungry for it. They can do it, they've done it. So we are highly competitive on a ton of maize internationally. So if you look currently, we are trading in dollar terms around about $190. And the US is trading at 220. So actually, we are one of the cheapest sources of maize globally currently. So maize, the productivity per hectare has expanded very fast. And you know what has happened? We've lost hectares. So we are now producing on smaller hectares than 20 or 30 years ago. Why? Because of the economics. Because we are constantly pushing that limit, and we are at export parity. And at export parity in most of the season. So if you're saying what's the right time, it's from now until September, and that's typically our window also for exports. Now, can we do something that pushes us a little bit above that? And I call it deep sea export parity to you. There's a difference in our export parity if we go into the region and deep sea. Deep sea gives us that last knock. We need to fall another 300 rand.
And that's the kind of cost of the boat implied in the export.
Everything, and that's we wrote an article in Business Day last week where we explain it's actually hitting us twice. The fact that we are now, it's hitting us in the reverse, the higher transportation costs. We need to get the maize out, so it actually dropped our export parity because the shipping rates are even higher to get our maize out into the foreign markets. So that's the logic behind it. And I think if we just look at hectares and how responsive farmers are to any kind of incentive in real terms. So if we look at hectares, we expanded, our hectares went up again in the last 4 or 5 years. Why? We had COVID, we had the Russia-Ukraine war, and there was good climate. So we actually expanded our hectares by another 300,000 hectares. But under these conditions, they're going to fall out again. And we'll have these hectares that can just manage to be competitive at deep sea export parity in the long run. You get these opportunities and blips, but we have land that we can expand in if we don't have to fall to deep sea export parity. And that's always, for me, the distinction.
Peter, if you had the opportunity to assist government to write the policy in the South African context, you're aware of the South African context, of our challenges, of where we are, and I'm specifically talking about the maize industry because we are in the maize industry. What would you want to see in a government's positioning on this?
What I would want to see, I would want to reduce the focus of government on agriculture and increase the focus on offtake. So focus on what's needed to make the oil come. So what incentives do the oil companies need to make them enthusiastic about using ethanol? One is there's a mandate, but that doesn't make anybody enthusiastic. So you can make people enthusiastic by giving them incentives, or you can make them enthusiastic by giving them penalties for not doing it, which they won't get. So, and that's where the focus needs to be, not so much on what crop can you use, where should it come from. You can create those incentives. You could say you get one tax credit if you use a crop that comes from underutilized land or has a carbon emission of X, and you get a lower incentive if you're using crop that comes from because the lower incentive ones will be the first ones taken, and then people will use. I mean, I used the example in Europe. I was saying it. So in Europe, it's all about sustainability. So carbon emissions are a critical issue. So the interesting thing is our long position at 100 million litres of ethanol a year. Right now, the prices of fuel alcohol are so high that we're exporting our long position
from here
in 4,000 and 5,000 cube vessels to Europe to put into petrol at our plants in Europe. So to do that,
we're exporting fuel to Europe
Yeah.
because of the share price, because of the price of oil.
the opportunity price of fuel in Europe
And
at the moment, and we are long.
Yeah.
So do I want to send it to West Africa for beverage, competing head-to-head with the local cassava, or do I send it to Europe? It makes more sense to send it to Europe. It doesn't always. It's just right now there's, it's a free market price. But the point what I was going to, so for us to do that, we have to be certified ISSC, okay, International Sustainability Carbon, and we're the only business in South Africa currently that's done it, and we had to work with grain farmers because they have to be certified. And that's to get our carbon emission per cube of ethanol to below 9 grams of carbon. Historically in Europe, you could sell your ethanol at a premium relative to the ethanol market price for fuel if it was 9. So the oil companies were getting a better tax credit because they were bringing their total carbon emissions, so we could charge more for our ethanol. What's happened over time is everybody has got ISSC systems, so now there's no premium at 9. Now, if you get to 6, you get a premium. So the oil companies are the people that are driving, and that's what I think. Agriculture will fill the gap if the demand is
They
created.
will provide whatever is required. So then, John, if that relies not with if Peter is right and it relies with the department where petroleum sits on it, that's a tight minister to talk to.
Yeah, but I think that what you have seen now is a bit of presidential impetus, and it arose from the last investor conference where a big company like UPL came and said we want to put a big investment into a biofuels plant in South Africa, but we need to see the policy changing. The president then tasked myself and one or two others to now go and come back to him with a plan going forward. Of course, it's going to have to involve the Department of Minerals and Petroleum Resources under Minister Mantashe. But I don't think he's as unreasonable as some people have found him to be in the past. I've certainly had a different interaction with him. But I think that the pressure's now on government to do something about these high input costs in agriculture, but also the fuel price for consumers. And given the fact that the medium-term development plans, one of its core philosophies is reducing the cost of living for consumers in the country, it is now back on the front foot. And I don't want us to lose the opportunity now to push this through. So, of course, we're going to have to involve them. We're going to have to involve the Department of Environment as well. They've got to have input into it. But I do think there's a new, refreshed impetus. We now have a task team that's looking at this, that's taken the 2014 policy and the work that was done there, looking at what's still relevant, what's not relevant, reworking it. Obviously, we'd have to bring in some of the private sector to have a look at that document and to then take it to Cabinet and get something concrete done on it. And rather than seeing the petrol price ebbing down again, which it inevitably will if the straits open and the conflict comes to an end, and then we lose the impetus again. I think that.
So this is one of those crises we need to use.
Yeah, absolutely.
Derek, what will it require for you to get back and energetically look at this?
Quite a lot. Is that enough said?
Yeah.
I've always said that a farmer, initially, in the process of writing the biofuels legislation and stuff, there was this old food versus fuel debate.
Yeah.
Maize, white meal, we feed it's our staple, food versus fuel. And that never ever worried me, because you just give me a reason to plant the maize and I'll plant it. You just all I need is a reason, and that reason is financial, it's profitability. So if I can have a sustainable profit, so what I'd be looking for now, after trying to push the wheelbarrow for a long time, is somebody that's going to be pulling it, right? You want the market you want to build a factory because of market demand, and then that market demand, it might work today. Whatever legislation we put in place, whatever policies we write or whatever, must understand that it's got to remain sustainable when the oil price is low and the grain price is high.
Mm-hmm. And that's where that's where you actually need what Peter was saying, a bankable
Yeah.
demand.
So that-
otherwise, you're gonna
And that
run
is
out of
where
stock.
that is where the nice to haves, and by that I mean the environmental benefits, all those nice things that you say about biofuels, renewable, etc., where they become weak. When financially prices are high and oil prices low, then that doesn't count so much anymore.
no,
So we've got to get it right.
I want to come back to you, Ferdi. So we back as a country a free agriculture market. We are supply and demand determines prices. It determines volume of goods. It determines margins. It's a complete free market and want to keep it that way.
Yep.
But now what Derek is saying is we now have it would be great to have that business now. But in 6 months' time or 18 months' time, El Nino strikes us. The maize price goes up. The Strait of Hormuz is opened. The oil price goes down. And now what now? And what free market operation will then still be able to deliver in this environment?
So I think to you, the incentives that Peter was talking about and Derek was hooking up, if you don't have that model right, you will be in trouble.
No.
But getting back to how sophisticated our futures market works and the good crop estimate, a good S&D committee that we know what the S&D ending stocks will be, that will give us in time. Just watch this new season evolving with El Nino in sight. Just watch what's going to happen. The futures market, everybody is already starting to factor in. So it's such an advanced market in the free market space that you already have your S&D. So if you're going to add another, let's call it 500,000 tons, 800,000 tons, it's going to factor it into the market. So I'm not saying that we will not have these high prices, but the way that our futures markets work is the positioning, and there will be it won't be a sudden crisis, oh goodness, we're going to run out. The futures are going to already take that into consideration, and we'll actually, what at the end will happen, we'll probably have a bit of an expansion in land, or the land that we're not going to go and contract because we don't have that buoyancy in our demand side. That will potentially remain in the market. And that's just quickly something on the market side. If we think about South Africa, and when we wrote the NDP back in 2010, we set 3 big pillars of growth. Those were the export-led high-value crops, agro-processing, and the underutilized lands. Those were the 3 big pillars. And if we think about our trajectory of export-led growth, we have achieved big milestone in that space. But if we think about agro-processing, where's our feed demand now? Very low. It's at 1%, 2% per annum. We were growing at 5 or 6%. That's the type of growth that we need to really kick our grain market forward. Otherwise, we're going to probably see some contraction in land as the yields are growing, and we'll have only these highly competitive fields producing at export parity with a growing yield. So we actually have an opportunity to maintain and actually expand into areas that we haven't, or maintain land.
Even within a free market system is what I'm picking up.
The free market system is already doing it.
Yeah.
It's already sorted it out for us over the last 10 or 20 years. So just keep to it and create that pull on the other side, and the market will sort it out.
And I think we've also seen a willingness of government now over this last crisis to intervene with adjustments to the levy.
Yeah.
So it's that type of adjustment to levies that you're going to need to try and help make it more pricing advantageous to be moving to the ethanol. So I think that
And I think that, I mean, that's where you have the opportunity to manage those, the gap between high fuel and high maize is because nobody, the interesting thing is maybe our logic says, farmers farm, that's what they're good at, and people that oil companies distribute petrol, and investors invest in ethanol plants or in agriculture is even in the U.S. I mean, the biggest producer of ethanol in the world is a company called POET, American organization, and it partners with agriculture, slightly different, but it runs the plant. It's not a farming company. But it partners with farmers or it builds its own. My only other comment is, that free market and that growth thing, what would I suggest to government and to the minister is the 2% mandate is too low to make anything happen, because 2% is 240,000 cubes. Our plants in Europe, we're a beverage grade, so we're at 100 million litres. We're a big beverage company on a global scale, but we're minute in fuel. Our plants in Europe are close to 400,000 cubes. One's over 700,000 cubes, and you've got 240,000 is the total mandate. You'll maybe build one factory here.
What would you kind of guesstimate? Where should that be, the blending mix?
I think you said the blending mix it can grow towards.
Okay,
so
but
you don't start at the floor.
It's got to be
Make it 8% or make it 10%, but it's if it's available, and then your incentive. So if there's only 2% available in the beginning, then there's only 2%.
Derek?
Yeah, it's the challenge is going to remain. It's when the things have changed. Then have we got the what's the right word? The sustainability into it. Is government is the incentive going to be able to be sustained? Now that is a huge question mark to me, because we know what the country's finances look like. And I can't see how they can possibly commit to a long-term sort of, to these incentives that are going to cost the fiscus, and unless there's that level of surety. When John was talking just now, I was just thinking, my question to you, John, would be, how fickle is that willingness now to do something? It can change overnight.
Yeah.
And then, then you've got somebody who's invested huge amounts of money in building a plant or whatever the case may be, and you're down the tubes.
Yeah, I think that the incentive there for government would be doing a cost-benefit analysis on what we're spending on importation of oil on an annual basis and what it means for percentage share of the budget vis-a-vis what it would cost you to guarantee or maintain a subsidy or incentive at the price point level over the longer period. And I would venture to say, and I've got the figures here, I haven't had a good look at them for a few weeks now, but I would venture to say that we would save money in the longer term by moving towards a system that moved away from an over-reliance and the amount of revenue we spend in a volatile rand dollar environment on purchasing fuel and oil into the country versus what we would then spend committing to a longer term commitment on the pricing point to keep the incentive there in the longer term.
Let me ask, we've got, I'll come back now. Is there any at this point, we've got about 15 minutes, any questions at this point from the audience? Yes, there's a question.
Thank you. My name is Johan Hofman. History is kind of repeat itself. 20 years ago, we've exactly got the same problem. We started a biofuel company in this country and we wanted to build 10 plants to actually take away the surplus of this country. We had finances, everything. We had the commitment from government at that stage. And unfortunately, the corruption at the end asked us, what is the in for us? We had the finances and we didn't want to give bribes, and at the end, maize was banned from ethanol production. You can't use maize for ethanol production. Now that's the history. It's now 20 years later, we're still there. The biggest thing here is you have to be able to use maize for ethanol. That's the first thing that had to change from government. Then there has to be a market for it, as Derek already said and you stated here. So there must be a market, so there must be a blended in from the petrol companies. The third thing is to sustain food security in this country. Farmers must make a profit. Current prices, we can't make a profit. Even with 7 tons a hectare, we can't make a profit. So, and the other thing is we must now from the beginning allow people to use lower grade of white maize, which is not suitable for food production, for ethanol production. I think this is the biggest thing now in the short term that will help the industry to reinvest in biofuels in South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comment on that, Derek?
Theo, I think, yes, Johan's right, but I think in a sense it's a bit of a dangerous place to be. Because as a farmer, I don't want to grow poor quality maize.
No.
I don't want to be dependent. The system cannot be dependent on just the poor quality maize. There shouldn't be any, the demand for maize should be high enough that the prices stay sustainably at a profit level for farmers. Simple as that. So whatever we do has to create the pull that Fat is talking about.
Yeah.
You've got to ensure sustainable demand.
No.
And the food security one was a bit of a fuffy as well, to be honest with you. Because if I certainly look at the numbers that have been presented to me, a biofuel, even with a 5 to 10% mix, is not going to have an intrinsic effect on food security in any way, shape.
No, and I'll have reason
or
to
form.
grow the stuff. I'll grow more hectares. Our farm was traditionally a maize farm. The maize was our main crop. It's long gone not a maize crop anymore. There was a period of 4 years that I didn't put one single maize kernel in the field because I couldn't make money on it. We're there again. No farmer in his right mind today can plan to grow a maize crop next year because he cannot make money on it. And that's just a terrible place to be.
This is where biofuel comes in as an additional demand pull factor in maize.
Absolutely.
All right. Any other questions before I come back to the panel? Any other questions? So is it then as simple as a minister signing a document?
I think it's a lot more complex than that. If it was that, we would be able to do it already. Certainly, if it was this minister, it's got to go through cabinet, and it's got to go through obviously the fuel lobby, which is a very strong lobby in the country, very powerful lobby in the country. But I do think that with enough effort, we can, enough impetus, and with consumers on our side, we're also looking for alternatives for cheaper input at a farm level, but also cheaper fuel prices. I think that the tide is with us, and what we can't do now is allow the tide to go out again. And then we're back at NUMPO in 10 years' time, and we're back talking, not talking about the 2014. We're talking about Steenhuisen's plan from 2026 that now has to be resurrected. I think we need to make a move. We've been left behind. We are way behind our BRICS counterparts. I think Brazil's on a 27% mix in 2015.
27 and talking about moving to 32 with the current oil
2015.
prices,
India's been above 15 for a long time. And these are peer countries of ours. So the time to strike is now, and to get it done and dusted before we start to hit the terrain that Derek's referring to, where we ebb out and then everyone forgets about this. Again, there is another form of impetus that our sugar industry is in deep trouble, and they see this as well as a way out of a large part of their problems. They've been hit by cheap imports into the country. I think you've seen the problems with Tongaat Hewlett and what that means for the sugar industry. There's a lot of upward pressure from the sugar industry now on DTRC and agriculture to get this thing over the line now, because they see this as the sunrise after them being hit with the sugar price problems, but also with the tax, the health tax, etc. that they've been suffering with. They see this as a way forward for them to bring sustainability and viability and profitability back into the sugar sector.
Peter, from your point of view, if we were to get government's proper commitment to assist with the demand, and I'm talking about specifically now your proposal demand from the fuel sector, either a pathway or a blending mix from day one, on the way to a pathway, given that you're involved internationally, do you believe there is sufficient capital that will be willing to invest once the rules are changed?
Capital is not complicated. Because if there's a market opportunity that's secure and the risk is reasonable, okay,
for the return,
then you will get an investment. You'll get the return. We've invested a lot of money over since the group bought us. When they bought us, we were 25 million litres. We're now 100 million litres. So we've invested a lot of money in a market that's completely free market. But we have a view that we understand that market. There is demand. Everybody likes drinking alcohol, which is useful, we're competitive in Africa, and you have to go to a certain scale, and that's where we steer a million miles away from a push market, because if you're secure that the oil companies are going to have to buy it, and that you can manage a floor price, and that would be the nuance of is so that my investment doesn't go underwater when the maize price goes up, or the sugar price goes up, and ultimately you then if you have enough capacity, you'll get to free market pricing. But then you would invest.
But there is countries that got it right.
India.
There are companies that got it right, but it has required no choice, and all of them inquire incentives or mandates or regulations or things. My concern again in here my recommendation is all of the focus to keep the input needs to be on the side that none of the very little has been, which is the demand. And two, you need to make it bigger, because your point about the sugar industry, at 2%, you convert one sugar mill to ethanol, and sorry for you, the 2% mandate's now full. Nobody else can play. So you've got a lot of, we stood from the outside, got quite a lot of conflict and positioning between sugar industry, maize industry, because there's like one bite at the cherry and nobody else gets a chance. And that's where the mandate needs to be.
And that's why the 2% makes no sense whatsoever.
Correct.
Yeah, it's got to be more.
Yeah.
We're slowly starting to come to the end of the discussion. That's my boss sitting there. From your point of view, you look at the overall agriculture sector. What we're discussing here and the opportunity, is this something that could play a major role in specifically the maize industry and the stability of long-term sufficient maize production?
Yeah. So, and I think too, there are, to your question, I think there are production side as well as demand side. So we're talking here demand, and 100% to your side, to your right. I mean, strategically, if we think about our NDP 2050, what are the next big tickets that we need to get right? And the reality is that we've outgrown a lot of our local markets with the capacity that we have, with the technology that we have, with the productivity that we have. So we will have to look at more innovative way to create processing, exportation, and we're talking now.
And creating the demand.
So whether that's chicken meat exports or beef exports, we talked about the whole livestock sector, the industry on that side. And in that way, what does it mean for local consumers? We can create, agriculture can make a contribution towards our crisis around unemployment. We cannot solve all of it. We are in relative terms, but in rural areas we have huge multipliers. And I think that's a story that we're still not quite effectively getting across. What are our multipliers in these rural communities? We talk about them loosely, but we need to get those numbers right, and then start to do the sensitivity analysis around the fuel market, because the debate's going to come. Oh, but we're going to sell maize for fuel, and we're going to run out of. It's going to come, Derek. It always
that
comes.
debate will come.
So we need to be prepared in a much more advanced way of running the numbers, and I think, John, you referred to that, saying those 2 out of 10 years, let's call them 2 out of 10 years, where we had a severe drought, and the maize prices run to import parity. How do we deal with that?
How do you manage with that?
How does the investor manage in that space?
Yeah, but I just want to say this is not, luckily, we don't have government intervening where you suddenly have these ad hoc. The market is going to see it, and the market's going to create, and they're going to import in time. And the imports will flow in at the coast. If you have, for example, these mills, you guys are sitting at the coast for a very strategic region, but there could be inland operations. So you'll have these imports flowing in. You'll have white moving completely out of feed, yellow coming in, supporting that. The market has done this before. We have a very advanced market. So I think we can actually, if we're not going to do it, let's say the devil's advocate, if we turn this thing around, if we're not going to do it, we're probably going to see a contraction of hectares.
In maize, yeah.
In maize.
In all grains.
Yeah, because it's, the most competitive hectares that make profit will remain. The others, you'll kind of put it again into some kind of layover, a crop rotation type of thing. Yeah, we have soyas in the game, which is great. It's just boosting our maize yields again. So that pocket is extremely competitive. but it will respond to profitability. And if we don't grow it, and I think given transportation, given international trade uncertainty, creating something, we call it a SAM, a serviceable market in the local market. If we can expand that, I think that's our next step as an opportunity.
A last question? Yes.
Thank you, Thea. You focused on maize now, but there are other crops that and other commodities that can possibly also go through that. More drought resistant can be grown in areas with low precipitation, sorghum specifically one of them, and which could also help bring markets in balance and reduce the maize hectares. Can we comment, or is the conversion just simply too low on something like sorghum to make it, and the other commodities to make it viable? Thank you.
Peter, can you?
Yeah, I mean, you can process sorghum. I mean, again, it's just a matter of what's available and what's the price. Is the US has large operations operating on a mix of maize and sorghum. Generally, we're not aware of any that are 100% sorghum. But
it can be.
Based on being invited to speak, we're doing some research on what those are. But and again, that's where you could make incentives. Imagine if you incentivized the oil company by giving them a bigger tax rebate if they paid more for ethanol that was produced on underutilized land.
Yeah.
Then maybe you would create that sorghum demand. You'd create the maize demand first, because, to be honest, the maize will come easier and quicker. But if you then say, well, hang on a second, the startup, because the risk factor of building a plant and then being dependent on a new crop being passed in an underutilized area, think of the other thing. What if the crop doesn't come? I mean, right now you've got mandates, you biofuel license, and there's a whole lot of things that go with it. So you've got to build a plant that needs, this plant our side will need similar volumes, 300,000 tons of sorghum to run our existing plant. And somebody's got to first plant it. And you're investing the money. There's no way you're going to do that until it's planted.
Derek, a last word from you?
Theo, the farmers are ready to do this. Believe me, soyas are a perfect example of that. They put up the demand. The demand was there for soyas, and now
The farmers just went.
how many years? 4 or 5 years later, we're in a surplus. Prices are now depressed in soyas because we can do it. Grain sorghum. My friend Willem is in the audience here from the sorghum cluster. How many hectares have we lost in sorghum production? There's a huge. Farmers understand how to grow sorghum. It's very similar to maize. It is more drought resistant. It does make a lot more sense. I get back to the what Ferdi was saying. If you create the market, you create a reason to grow the crop. The farmer
Farmers
will
come.
grow whatever the market wants. And if sorghum makes sense, if the price is good for sorghum, and we are in a volatile climate, we do have so sorghum is more drought resistant, and of course that's what I'm going to do. We're more than ready to do it. I mean, just in our area, we've seen quite a lot of expansion in sorghum this year. There's a lot of sorghum grown there.
Thank you very much, guys. I've run out of time. Derek, thank you very much. Peter, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ferdi. John, I'm going to ask you a last question.
Yeah.
And this is a bit of a loaded question. This is a loaded question. If you look back pre the government of national unity, being appointed as Minister of Agriculture, and today, what surprised you, positive and negative, on, let's say, the broader agriculture community?
So, I mean, certainly going into a department, and I think I said it in one of the earlier sessions, that you sit in an opposition with a particular view of what's going on in government. And I can tell you, having got there, it's 1,000 times worse than you ever imagined when you're in the opposition. To just see how really good people have been completely under-resourced to be able to do their jobs and responsibilities. And you just wonder how anything was moving at all, given the massive under-resourcing there. I mean, we've really got some excellent people in the department. Our registrar, for instance, at Act 36, but cut off at the knees because not enough staff to be able to process applications, then he gets the hammering for not being able to process fast enough. But have we really given them the opportunity? And that's the thing that's really surprised me in government. We've expected people to perform miracles, but not even given them the most basic of tools. The most positive thing that I'd say is that the sector really is a can-do sector. And where you're very lucky as a minister in this sector, unlike other areas, is that the real expertise, knowledge, know-how, experience exists in the sector, in the industry bodies like Grain SA and the other ones, and their willingness to be able to share that knowledge. And so that's why I've had to reorient the department's view to saying our job is not to farm or tell people how to farm. It's to build the system that enables
Create the
Derek,
ecosystem.
to create the Derek Matthewses and others to be able to do what they do best, which is go out and produce at big numbers. And then also to do what Ferdi said, is try and open markets, because that's where our farmers get the premium. Being able to open more markets for sale in overseas markets for our farmers. And we've seen that certainly in the citrus, deciduous fruits industry, and when that happens, the pull-through and the demand that creates to supply those overseas demands pulls more players into the value chain, more small-scale players being pulled in to meet the demand, more hectares being put under orchard to be able to meet that demand. And that, for me, is where a large part of the future lies, is in creating those demands for our agricultural products so that our farmers get the premiums on that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Derek.
Yeah, sure.
There's just a quick question. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I'm taking a gap here to you. I just don't want to let the conversation on biofuels die here. So I just want to know, where are we going from here, and who's going to take the lead?
Yeah. So we've already set up a task team between our three departments that are busy looking at the 2014 document, and as I said, seeing what still is relevant there and what's not, and then starting to crunch the numbers. And we've obviously had some private sector assistance as well, but I do think there's now an opportunity, and having listened on the panel now to what's been said, to widen that to include some of the people that are here, to give some insight into it, so that we don't lose the momentum going forward. My real worry is that, well, I suppose we all want the war to end in Iran, but we, that it ends tomorrow, the fuel price improves, and everyone says, okay, off we go then, and we forget about this.
Forget about the whole thing.
Forget about the whole thing. I think we've got to use the impetus that we have now to really get this thing over the line, so we're not sitting in another 10 years having the should we, shouldn't we debate. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Ferdi. Thank you, Peter.
Sure.
Thank you, Derek. I just want to thank specifically again Agri SA for the great event that they're running for Nampo. There's a reason why this is probably, yes.
Grain
Great
SA.
Who did I say?
Agri SA.
Oh, apologies. That is my fault. I apologize. I sincerely apologize. Can you please scrap that from the record? That was never said. That was... Yeah, can I retake that? I want to thank everybody from Grain SA, specifically Forrest Gump. Thank you very much. Thank you, Derek. Thank you for coming around. Sure. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, everybody from Grain SA. I think there's a reason why Nampo is internationally recognized, and there's a reason why people want to come here, and it shows the energy and the positiveness of the South African agriculture sector. Thank you very much, and thank you, Grain SA. And thank you to the panel.
Thank you. Thank you to you.
Thank you.